Hi, my name is Lawrence and I'm not an expert. But the assertions I'm making here are carefully researched. Here's a PDF online and the references. I'm mainly referring to England and Wales, but the lessons are there for us all. The video is a plea for the 38 odd million people in these shores for whom COVID is no more life-threatening than many of the sports it's squeezed out of our lives. So for goodness sake, let's get those people back to something like normality. I know that the NHS is currently flooded with COVID. I know that new variants might be even more transmissible, that cases are going up, that the R number is rising, that so many people have tragically died or suffered long COVID and continue to die and suffer. So I'm not saying do nothing. The opposite, I'm saying do everything we can to reduce this tragedy. But let's concentrate our efforts where they're needed. Look at the massive influence of age on death. It's the older and more vulnerable who are clogging up the NHS. So let's roll up our sleeves and focus on the problem. Let me explain a bit more. With the recently published vaccination plan, if they manage to vaccinate, say, 1 million people a week, it will take not till Easter, but until 2022, until we've vaccinated twice those who are vulnerable either through age or illness. So, how are we going to handle that year or more? In and out of Tier 4? Really? Look, it's no longer a secret that bad science has thus far been underpinning our strategy. Data presented by the PM's team has been alarmist and I'm sorry to say wrong. And as a recent BBC documentary showed, these guys are out of their depth. And yet they're still the same ones running the show with just one tool in their hand. That is, various versions of lockdown, a tool that the WHO beg us not to employ. Their current strategy is to go in and out of Tier 3, according to whether or not cases are going up and down. I'm sorry, guys, but this is fundamentally flawed for 5 reasons. First reason, the bug comes back. You can't wipe out COVID. Wales recently did a 100% lockdown as a circuit breaker. The effect barely lasted a fortnight before they were back to the same place. Meanwhile, how much has the tiered lockdown cost? Second reason, compliance. Will 60-odd million people meekly comply with a year in and out of Tier 3 and 4? Will they meekly stay indoors even when their childcare, their job, their sanity, or their fun depend on breaking the rules? Who could blame them? Complicated rules don't work in complex systems. Third reason, this policy is aimed at reducing death and NHS overload. But even in relation to this, it's a mixed blessing. It's true deaths are being prevented, mainly, not entirely, in 80-plus-year-olds, many with dementia and other vulnerability, but also younger deaths and harms have been prevented. However, against this, we're already looking at roughly 400 extra weekly deaths from cancer next year as a result of the NHS not functioning properly. Also, cardiovascular deaths not being prevented, not being treated early. There'll be mental health deaths. 2 million routine ops are already cancelled. How many of these cancellations were also a death sentence? Furthermore, on a national scale, the deaths are now back to within 4% or so of the 5-year average. So if the vulnerable are benefiting to a degree from lockdown, they're also suffering. Their health has been put on hold. Which brings me to the fourth reason we're on the wrong track. The terrible price we are paying for this mixed blessing received. 1 million jobs been lost already. Education system hit hard. Justice system unravelling. Doubling of poverty and all its consequences. Mental health problems, drug use, marital breakdown, social unrest. Businesses on the brink, about to go under. And what's more, the harms of lockdown are disproportionately affecting the ones who are getting just about no benefit at all. The healthy under 45s, whose risk of ICU admission, even at the height, was 2 per million. And now we have Tier 4. Can we really stand another year of it? The fifth reason, and finally, believe me, herd immunity is not an illusion. It's just a simple scientific fact. The more people who are immune, the less the transmission. Our best long-term protection against this or any future coronavirus is herd immunity. Falling daily case numbers are actually delaying the arrival of a post-COVID world, not advancing it. So what should we be doing? Well, number one, focus our protection on the vulnerable. Every single vulnerable person currently in an ICU bed with COVID caught the virus from someone else. So let's fix that. A recent paper modelling focus protection demonstrated 93% reduction in mortality in the vulnerable if you do it right. Other research really underlines the importance that even if you contact the virus, the importance of reducing the numbers of virus particles you're exposed to by the things we already know: meeting outdoors, social distancing, ventilation indoors, avoiding crowding, short and infrequent exposures to potentially infected people, and so on. But it's much harder to stick to these things when there's no focus and when we're all subject to the same desperate restrictions. Second thing we should be doing, let's have policies that make focus protection work. For instance, in relation to help with childcare, separate facilities, care home strategies, and so on. Thirdly, just my opinion, but let's get the professionals like the army in to give the vaccine to maintain the cold chain. Fourthly, be open to developments. For instance, ivermectin is emerging as a potential treatment, as are other drugs. Fifthly, in northern countries, we all need vitamin D daily. Number 6, stop trying to alarm and dupe and start trying to use data to drive sensible behaviour. We don't want to know numbers of cases. We want to know how our focus protection is protecting the NHS ICU beds. And if it's not doing that, well, we need to up our game. Finally, for the rest, for the healthy under 45, say, let's get back to something like normal. Let's save what businesses we can, save what education we can, save what social structure we can, save what justice system we can, what sports, what pastimes, what mental health, what marriages, what hope. If this focus protection plan goes well, job done. If it goes badly, we'll have a few more months of NHS chaos, with a high number of deaths, mainly in the elderly. By contrast, if the tier system for a year went well in protecting the NHS, then the minimum cost is catastrophe to the economy, social structure, justice, education, and so on. And if it goes badly because people rebel, especially in the light of the new variants, let me finish with a few more words on herd immunity and policy. It turns out that a very large majority of those immune to the first COVID-19 will also be immune to the new one. Thanks not to antibodies, but to T-cell immunity, which seems to transfer from coronavirus to coronavirus. In fact, it seems that maybe even 20, even 50% of our population might have T-cell immunity to COVID due to exposure from previous coronaviruses, ordinary colds even. That still leaves about half the population of the UK, though, who by Easter will not have had either virus or vaccine. So, at 30,000 infections per day plus vaccination, it's going to take one heck of a time before all of these, half the population, are immune. By contrast, 300,000 infections a day, and the post-COVID world arrives 10 times faster. So rising number of cases is not necessarily the enemy. Here's the rub. Which would be better? Rapidly rising transmission for a few months while we reach this herd immunity, or a year or more in and out of tears? The answer depends on how we can reduce the fallout of a tsunami of infections. And we have it in our hands to limit that fallout dramatically in ways we've already mentioned. Focused protection, immunisation, social isolation systems, vitamin D, better treatments, and so on. So, in summary, we think that because the vaccine is here, we can relax. But we've got at least a year to go. In and out of Tier 3 until 2022, is that the best we've got? And what about the tens of millions of people for whom this virus is no worse than flu, who've had to give up so much for the vulnerable? Success in this fight will not be measured because lockdown is reducing the number of cases, because when we peep out again, the virus will still be there. We can't rid the planet of COVID. No. Success will be measured by looking back eventually and saying we minimised the harm. Thanks for listening.